Good afternoon and welcome to another Unreal 4 shoot 'em up tutorial. So this one's going to be very quick, which is good because it's really hot at the moment and I can feel the heat emitting from the PC. So what we'll be doing today is adding the primary and secondary projectiles to the game specifically, those classes which we're currently missing. So to do this, if we navigate to the blueprints folder, we will right click on the BP projectile player base and create a charge blueprint on this. And we'll just remove the base part and we'll call the first one primary. And we'll do the same again and we'll call the second one secondary at the end, just so we can differentiate between these. What I would do at this stage as well is start creating folders just to keep the hierarchy a little bit tidier here. So we'll just call this the projectiles folder. And then if we shift select all of these and just drag them in and move them to that new folder. So we could quite easily create completely unique projectiles here. We don't get a whole lot of benefit from using inheritance at this stage because we're making so many minor changes, but I did want to use it because inheritance is really useful, really powerful, and definitely worth getting your head around. So if you remember what we're doing in the base class, in the construction script, we're setting the dynamic material of the projectile. We're then storing a reference to this so that we can update this a bit later. We're setting the projectile's 3D world scale. So we're getting that, we're storing it into the scale value, and we're setting that back in as the scale of the projectile. And that's going to be really useful in a moment, you'll see why. And then we're also storing a reference to the projectile movement and setting the maximum and the initial speed. Again, that's going to be really useful in a moment as well. And what this means is because we're using inheritance is that we only have to do all of this once, which has been done here in the base class. And in the new classes we've just created, if we open these up and go back to these, what we can do now is if we go to the primary projectile, for instance, we can, if you remember, we're already setting the color we want this to be in the player when the player spawns this. So all we actually need to do is we can leave the scale. I'm going to leave the scale for this one as 1, 1, and 1, but we can give it some unique values now under the speed and the other variables that we've exposed down here. And saying that actually made me realize that we are missing something here. So if we just Control W the speed to copy that, and we'll call this new variable damage, which just means that we can apply the, we can set the damage value for the child blueprints of the projectiles as well. So if we head back over to the primary projectile and make sure that you have the top layer selected here, the actual blueprint itself, and we can see that we have under the default section now we have these values that we've created. So we have speed, damage, and scale are the important ones. So for the scale, I'm going to leave this as 1, 1, and 1, just want a nice simple cube for the primary projectile. We can set the damage to be something like 10, so this will take, depending on how much health we give the enemies, this will take a little bit more damage to kill the enemy, but obviously we can use these quite freely and they're quite fast as well. And that's the other thing, we can then set the speed. I'm going to set this to 400 just to offset quite nicely with the projectile fire rate. So if we compile that, that is actually the primary projectile now ready for use. We have the unique values which will make up this projectile type. We don't need to worry about the color again because that's all being set up in the player. If we move over to the BP projectile secondary, we can do the same thing again. So for the secondary projectile, I want to make the scale of this one a little bit different just so it stands out a bit more. I'll make this 1, 1, and 3 just so it's a slightly longer projectile. And then for the speed, I'll make this move a lot faster because we are making these projectiles fire less often. And for the same reason, we can give them a little bit more damage, but again, you're not going to get quite as many of them. So it kind of balances out that you don't overpower something. And this is something that you're just going to have to get used to in Prototype and try and make feel good for your own game. But these sort of values should work just for demonstration purposes. And then the final thing, just to finish all of this off, as I said, this is really simple. We're going to go to the BP_player. We will find our functions that we've made. So we have our primary fire. And remember, at the moment, we're using the base projectile because we didn't have anything at this time. We can now replace this with the BP_projectile player primary. And then find your secondary fire function as well. They'll also be found over here. And again, this is going to be the base class, so just swap this out to be the secondary class. And now if we go in and hit play and try firing, we should see that the projectiles are moving differently. They also have gravity applied, and we can see the secondary projectiles are longer, moving slightly slower, but if we had enemies, they would be damaging differently as well. And then I'm just going to go back and work out why these have gravity on them. Okay, for some reason it seems to be affecting the primary projectiles. If we go back to the base class, I didn't realize that we left the projectile gravity scale as 1. So if we just zero that out and hit compile, haven't tested it, but this should fix the problem. Yep, so now we have, there we go, all of the projectiles are flying without gravity, continuing in the correct direction. And we can see that the really great use of inheritance is that we only had to change 3 values on each projectile, and we haven't needed to recode anything. It saved us doing the same logic over and over again for different types of projectiles because they have very similar setups. So I'll leave this video here for today. As always though, if you found this useful, then please do leave a like and share the video around. That's really going to help again grow the channel, and I'm really trying to reach more people at the moment so we can help as many people as we can with these videos. Only way I can really do that with is going to be with help from you guys and getting some traction for these videos. Likewise, if you want to be kept up to date with the latest content on the channel, because I'm now starting up a couple of different playlists as well, so I have some content for asset creation through Blender and some speed level design. So if you're only really looking out for these, you may be missing those. So to be kept up to date with all of the content from the channel, do consider subscribing. And as always, I like to finish off the videos with a big thank you to the current supporters of the channel via Patreon. So thank you again for your continued support. And if you had considered supporting the channel, then do click the link below. Do have a look through the Patreon page and check out some of the reward tiers as well, because I think there's some really interesting stuff for those who wanted to pledge a little more. And you can get some access to my Udemy content and potentially future content I'll be creating for the paid work that I do as well. As ever though, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.